The first verse of the 21st chapter of the book of Revelation, and reading through verse 8. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and shall be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow, nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said unto me, It is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. But the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. There was no more sea. This phrase has caused questions through the years. What exactly does it mean? Of course, it may be just as simple as saying that in the new earth there will be no more sea. It will all be land. But the symbolic nature of Revelation causes me to doubt this simplistic and largely unimportant interpretation. Something else is involved here, and it has to do with the symbolism, the symbolic meaning of these verses in this book. And the sea has often been used in the Bible as the symbol of restlessness, the wanderer upon the seas. The wicked are like the moving sea, the prophet said, tossing and turning, coming in, going out, shifting, casting up mire upon the sands, and never still, never at rest. Well, this is something that the Bible is clear on. Job said it. The psalmist said it. The prophets have said it often, and we have said it in the old hymns of the faith. Dark is the wilderness. Earth has no resting place. Man cannot find a place of rest upon this earth. Rest is simply not available to us. I was watching on an educational channel several years ago an interview, a program between Mortimer Adler, who's been one of the great philosophers of our times, and the journalist Bill Moyers. Moyers asked the question, Dr. Adler, what comment would you make about your life, your philosophizing, and your search? Mortimer Adler answered without hesitation, I am a man that has found no rest. I have no rest in my soul. The Moyers then asked him if he'd ever met a man who had found rest. Adler's answer was that he had known certain men of the Christian religion who appeared to have found rest. And I'm happy to tell you that if Moyers' later report was correct, and I believe that it was, Mortimer Adler repented, was baptized, and joined the Christian faith, and found his rest before meeting his Maker. Verse 2 says, I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Why does God speak of a city? When he talks about the future and the cohabitation together with the saints, why does he put it in this term? Well, the term city actually means a fortress, an encampment, a place with walls around it, a place where people band together for the security of numbers and the common defense against enemies. But the concept of a city even goes back further and is more basic than that. It goes way back to the very reason why God created man. Why did he create us? God was perfect, is perfect, has always been perfect. We know that. We believe that. We could never describe God as being unhappy before he created man, because anybody that is perfect is not unhappy. So why then did God create man? It was because he wanted someone to cohabitate with. He wanted a wife to intercourse with. He wanted a family. He wanted people around him. He wanted someone of his own kind with which to share. Why did God create a woman for the man in the garden? Well, it was for the very same reason, you see, because Adam was looking around at all this beautiful and perfect garden and all those beautiful non-carnivorous animals that were in there. But there was something missing in Adam. He kept looking for a mate, and he couldn't find one. Well, evidently, a good part of Adam's time was taken up in the garden looking for that something, and that something that was missing. God beheld this, and he saw that it was not going to be a good thing for Adam to be the only one in the image of God in this entire garden. Now, this is not to deny or even comment on the sovereignty of God in the plan before the world was, but it is to say that God reacted to time and history, and that this reaction was real. And finally, God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he created a woman, one who was made in the image of man, with whom he could share and cohabitate, and with whom he could populate the earth. There is an innate longing in man, irrespective of what our personalities are, what our callings are, whether we're loners who enjoy our solitude or social mixers. This longing may express itself in different ways and to different magnitudes to different people, but it's there. Everybody needs to be part of a family. You cannot exist in an entirely lonely state. Well, this has been noted in many ways. No man is an island, the poet said. No man stands alone. We must cohabitate to be happy. The prospects for the eternal future is a camp of people, God and his children together in close proximity, having to do with one another. Now, this camp is described as the New Jerusalem. And, of course, we know what the term Jerusalem in the Hebrew means. It means the city of righteousness and the city of peace. There are messages in that name. What is the problem with the system of cohabitation today? Unrighteousness, hostility, violence, selfishness, theft, muggings. The things which destroy the peace are unholy and unrighteous things, and which turn beautiful, gleaming cities into slums and so on. Unrighteousness, hostility, violence. These are the very thing that caused God to destroy the race in the great flood. God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, according to Genesis 6, 5, and 7, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. Verses 11 through 13 of that 6th chapter, the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. God saw that the earth was full of violence and bloodshed, and the thoughts and the intents of the hearts of men were only evil continually. Man cannot live like this, God said. You simply can't dwell together like that. But this city, this New Jerusalem, is a city of peace. Well, why will there be peace? There will be peace because there is righteousness. If we lived in a world where everybody was right all of the time, we'd have peace. There would be peace in families. We would have peace between neighbors, peace between the board of directors and the rest of the city, peace in the nation, and peace in the world. If everybody was right all the time, if everybody always did the right thing, the fair thing, if nobody ever took advantage of anyone else, if nobody ever stole anything from anybody, nobody ever hurt anyone's feelings or did anything like that, we would have peace. God has known from the very beginning that this is the way it was, and this is what God has been moving toward through Jesus Christ. The whole program, the supralapsarian plan from before the world, the time and history plan, the garden, the fall, the redemption, and the future. It all has to do with people being right, and being right because they know from experience what being wrong is, and they have made a choice. They do not want to be wrong anymore. They want to be right. No one will be allowed in that city who has not made that choice and who does not have that attitude. No one. Well, that's the way it will be in the new creation. We'll live in a city of righteousness and a city of peace. And this is not election year rhetoric. It's the ultimate reality. This city comes from the very throne of God. We started the book of Revelation with John being exalted and elevated to the throne of God in order to get a divine perspective on all things revealed. This does not mean to tell us that the city is being built up in the sky somewhere and that someday it's going to come down on the earth. The message is that this comes from the throne of God. This is the result of what God is doing. This is the end product of all the activity that is coming out of the throne and upon this earth through Christ, through the church, through the sounding of the trumpets, through the vials and through the plagues and all things that we see here. This is the end result of it all. A new heavens, a new earth, a city of righteousness. Well, this city looked like a bride adorned for her husband. To dramatize this, the Holy Ghost brings up the imagery of the bride and the groom. And we're talking about cohabitation, living together, intercoursing together, and producing things that are good and wholesome and fulfilling and meaningful. Only now there are no anxieties, no children, no old people, no failing, no dying. This is going to be a relationship between God and man forever. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. The tabernacle of God is with men. The word tabernacle literally means the tent. It again draws on the Old Testament analogy. God had Moses build a tent. It was a temporary building in the wilderness that could be easily moved as the people went from place to place. How God came down into that tent of meeting, and there, under the procedures and prescriptions which all spoke of Christ and the coming redemption, when they were all just right, God came into that tent of meeting and met together with man. And as long as those conditions were met, the glory stood in the holiest place, and God was with them, leading and protecting them. The tent of God is with men. God is going to camp together with men. He is going to cohabitate with man. He's going to be among us. He's going to be in our midst. He's going to live with us. He's going to dwell with us. Now, even though the imagery of a tent is used here, this does not mean that there is anything temporary in this scene. But if there is, I do not see it. This is emphasizing the aspect of the building that has to do with meeting and dwelling together, the tent of meeting. This describes the time when there will be no more separation between God and man forever. Man once had fellowship with God, then that fellowship was destroyed, and there was separation. When was that? It was in the garden, when Adam violated the commandment of God and hid from God because he was ashamed and guilty. No matter how people harden their hearts, when they're wrong, they're guilty. Now, you may not feel as guilty as you used to, but try as you will, you cannot get rid of your guilt, and you should not be able to. People who have guilt complexes should not have them. That is a bad and unnecessary state of mind that can ruin you emotionally and mentally. But people who feel guilty because they're wrong should feel guilty. When you do wrong, you need to feel guilty. If you're to remain human with a normal and not a reprobate mind, you must have basic conflict. Sociologists have spent much of public education's money trying to get your children not to feel guilty about anything. They brainwash them day and night, trying to convince them that there are no rights and no wrongs, and therefore guilt is a religious superstition. But it doesn't work. Even though philosophically we try to get rid of the moral law and its absolutes, instinctively we feel guilty when we know we have violated God's laws. And that is very good. It is exactly how we should feel. There is a mental and emotional state known as a guilt complex. There are people who go around feeling guilty, feeling that they're wrong all the time, and they don't even have any idea what they're guilty of, or what they're wrong about, or what they're supposed to have done, or what they think they did. They're just on a guilt trip. That is not good. Religious humanism may encourage that, but Orthodox Christianity does not. That is faithlessness, and it's unbelief. But to feel guilty when you're wrong is necessary. We must feel guilty when we are wrong, and inevitably this wrong and guilt separates between God and man. Oh, yes, it does. But now, through Christ and the program of redemption, God and man are back together. That is God's decision. I am going to be in your midst, and I am going to dwell with you. And because all imperfection and evil and death and all that destroys has been eliminated, you will be my people, God said. And this is a statement of the condition by God Himself that will prevail in the future. Man, from the heart, will love and worship and revere and obey his God. And God will not only dwell with them and be with them, but He shall be their God. The thing that God wanted to do more than all else for the human race was to be their God, their leader, their father, their instructor, teacher, protector, provider, and the object of their worship. That's the way it has to be between God and His creation. It's the only right relationship there is. In his fallen condition, the cunning mind of man tries to turn that around. He tries to overthrow it. He tries to undermine it philosophically. But for things to be right between God and man, it has to be that way. This is a principle that follows all the way down. For there to be happiness in the home, the father has to be respected. There cannot and will not be happiness otherwise. It's morally right. We're not talking now about individual responsibilities, but axioms. It has to be that way. There can be no happiness, contentment, security, joy, and peace. Otherwise, a society has to respect its leaders. If it does not, this creates unrest, depression, fear, gloom, confusion, suspicion, and paranoia. You may say that some leaders do not deserve respect. Well, that may be, and that is a problem too. But Jesus said to His disciples to respect those who sit in Moses' seat, even if they are wrong and you cannot follow their examples. You can respect them without admiring their moral character or the lack thereof. Why did Jesus tell them that? He told them that because it's a necessary state of affairs for order in society and for the well-being of man. There are certain things that simply have to be. In our society, we say, oh, no, it does not have to be that way. We just held a symposium, and all the greatest minds agree that it does not have to be that way. Well, my friend, that sort of rebellion changes nothing. These are absolute axioms of God. God has to be God. He has to be looked at in that way by His people. He has to be respected and revered as God. Otherwise, things are wrong. Life comes from God, and true freedom is righteousness. True righteousness means, among other things, to be in a right relationship with God. There is no true and meaningful and beneficial freedom where there is no righteousness. There can be no life if there's no light. And so we have to have these things in our experiences. St. John was addressing this very subject when he said that the man who walks in the light has fellowship with God. That is the truth which we saw and handled and heard from the very beginning, he said. It was this that they observed and learned from Jesus Christ. There can be no life where there is no light, and there can be no fellowship with God where there is no submission to the rule of God. God will be their God because the people in that new creation, having been reborn in immortality, will not only be right all of the time, but they will be right because that is what they want to be.